Well, anyway, we have to go because we have Ian Anderson, Jethro Tull. He is phenomenal. He's actually going to be calling in from somewhere around the world. He's not even in this country right now. But Jethro Tull, one of the great groups. Ian Anderson with us next on 710 WOR.
The Mark Simone Show, 710 WOR.
Well, with us right now, one of the great names in music, the great songwriter, singer, musician, Ian Anderson. Jethro Tull, of course, one of the great albums was Thick as a Brick, and there's a Thick as a Brick 2 album now, a sequel. He's on tour all over the world. He's with us right now. Ian Anderson, how are you?
I'm very well indeed. I'm on tour all over the world, but it won't go on forever, which is why I'm on tour all over the world, because if I don't do it now, it'll all be too late.
Oh, that's what you think. Yeah. It is going to go on forever.
Well, I tell myself that on a bad day.
Where are you right now?
I'm in my in my rehearsal room and office down in the southwest of England.
Oh. And, yeah, I'm looking at your schedule. You know, it's not like Boston, Cleveland. It's like Helsinki. I mean, it's all great cities.
Well, if it was Boston and Cleveland, I would just hop on a plane. And being a cheapskate, it would probably be Southwest or, one of those budget carriers. But I would just hop on a plane, play 3 shows, and then go home for another couple of nights. But unfortunately, when we travel, being out and about around the world, you have to go away sometimes for a few weeks at a time, which is not the most enjoyable thing, when you have other stuff to do at home and friends and family and grandchildren. Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear.
Yeah.
Time flies.
Now, if you're in New York and you say, well, when do I get to see him? You'll actually be here in October. I think Westbury is October 8th.
Yeah, we start up on the next U.S. tour. It's the second one this year, and we're kicking off in Westbury, and then back for a couple of shows after that to
I think you go to the Beacon
Theatre. Again. Yeah, we were there last year, so they've added another couple of shows this year for those folks who couldn't get in through the tightly locked doors last time.
Hey, Ian Anderson, how many instruments can you play?
Well, I don't really play any of them very well. I suppose the flute is the thing I'm best known for, and probably the one that I'm best at playing, and I've probably made my stamp on that musical instrument, which sort of sets me apart from my peers, both in the world of classical music and folk music and rock music, for that matter. So that's the thing I'm remembered for, and probably the instrument I enjoy most, since I have a very personal relationship with it. But most of my songs are written using the acoustic guitar, and so that's certainly my second instrument, and I'm a quirky, idiosyncratic guitarist, which is a way of saying that I'm not Eric Clapton.
Who would be the other great flautist in the rock and roll world? I think you're it.
Well, it's a pretty small field. When I started, there were a few people playing and most often in pop music, but there was just this little smattering of flute, more as a decorative thing. And the Moody Blues were probably the band contemporaneous with the early Jethro Tull, who had a flute player in the band, and he was, he didn't play really to the full extent of the instrument. It was more in a decorative way, whereas when I started being an ex-guitarist, I tried to play the things that I played on guitar, which was aggressive and forceful, was riffs and solos. So set me apart from the other guys, I think.
Also, you were, you could see that you were very influenced by jazz, which would also mean maybe you're one of the few guys that really know what to do with a flute. In the rock and roll world.
That's the nicest thing a man said to me all morning. When I started playing, it was guitar playing. That was the thing. Everybody wanted to be a guitar player, so there was no point in trying to learn to play the flute in the classical style or even the jazz style, because most jazz flautists were actually saxophone players who doubled on flute. Yeah. Not all of them, but most of them. A lot of people dabbled on flute, but I didn't want to do that stuff, and I wasn't knowledgeable about jazz. I didn't know all the chord progressions. I didn't grow up with studying bebop or any of the precursors to the more jazz rock, I suppose, of late 60s, early 70s. So I wasn't an accomplished musician in the academic sense, and I still am not today, although I find myself having to write music and arrangements for string quartets and orchestras and so on as well. But I do it from the point of view of what's in my head, what's in my heart, and I use a scribe to write it down for me. He being John O'Hara, the academically educated musician in the band. Well, actually, there's three of them, but John is the one who usually puts it all into the dots and dashes and that curious form of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which orchestra musicians tend to need to read.
Oh, we're talking to Ian Anderson, of course. Jethro Tull, one of the biggest albums was Thick as a Brick. You wrote the album, and now you've actually done Thick as a Brick 2, a sequel. What gave you the idea to do that?
Well, it was suggested to me many times over the years by record company people, by fans, by media people, and I didn't resent being asked. It's nice always to be asked to do something, but I really didn't feel motivated to do something that seemed to be cast in nostalgia, for the 70s. And it was only when, I think, at the end of 2010, suddenly in a conversation up came the question, I wonder whatever happened to Gerald Boster, the fictitious child poet who supposedly wrote the lyrics of Thick as a Brick. And that just then spurred this notion of, well, what would he be doing today? What happens to all of us when we grow up? We don't become the engine drivers or fighter pilots that we thought we would be when we were children. We tend to, life takes us in different directions, and I thought it'd be fun to explore what some of those directions might have been, and both good and bad, because things don't turn out necessarily very well for everybody. Some people find their lives taking a downward spiral, and things are pretty bleak. But I wanted this to have an upbeat kind of an ending, and with just that faint suggestion that some mysterious purpose might lie behind it, whether you call it fate or kismet or karma, or just plain old religion of any sort, because fate plays a part in most world religions. So I thought I would follow that notion, and out came a sequel. After about 3 or 4 weeks of working on it, I had 90% of an album there. So it was done in a fairly fast and furious bout of songwriting back in the beginning of 2011. Yeah. We didn't record it till the end of 2011 because we were on tour all year.
Well, it's Thick as a Brick 2. It's a great album. Don't you find as a songwriter that the best songs, the best work just comes flying out very fast?
Well, it hopefully comes flying out very fast, but it doesn't necessarily just erupt out of nothing. I mean, I'm a taskmaster for myself. I like to put myself under a bit of pressure and have some discipline. So the album that I wrote most recently, which I'll be recording at the end of this year, was begun at 9 a.m. on January the 1st, 2013, because that's what I decided many, many months ago that I would do. And so at the appointed hour, I sat down with my guitar and my flute and my little laptop computer on my knee to scribble down words and ideas, and worked at it for about 3 weeks, and again had almost all of an album. I mean, you always tweak it and edit it and fool around a little bit, especially in the process of recording it. But it's substantially there. I made demos of it all, and I just have a few little things to do, as well as to write the show, because next year's show will be, again, a rather more theatrical show with a lot of elements in it, which, whilst they're not as important as the music, you still have to sit down and write it all down, every little thing that's going to happen on stage, and then you've got to bring it to life with video and rehearsal and choreography and all the rest of it.
Hey, I'm trying to think. Thick as a Brick 2, it's a great album, but I'm trying to think in the past, was there ever a sequel to an album that was a huge success?
Well, Bat Out of Hell, the sequels come thick and fast, actually, in the world of music. Maybe not quite as thick or quite as fast as Sylvester Stallone and the Rocky series, or any of the folks who, when they're onto a good thing, come out with another. But, for me, it was important, I think, if I was ever going to do a follow-up, it had to have a long stretch of time in between. So it was actually 40 years between the release of Thick as a Brick 1 and Thick as a Brick 2. So as sequels go, it was a long time in the making.
Now, hey, we're talking with Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. When you were growing up, for a time you were growing up in Blackpool, England, which is a nice seaside resort town. But at that time, all the big groups would come play there. Do you remember as a kid seeing some of these great groups?
Well, they certainly did play in Blackpool, but for the most part, it wasn't rock music. It was generally the pop singers of the day. So we had a whole series of Elvis imitators, back in the early '60s, and they would play the holiday resort towns. I mean, imagine Blackpool. Put it in some kind of context. We're probably thinking, of somewhere down, some seedy place down the New Jersey shore.
Yeah, well,
or even Atlantic City. It's that sort of an environment, and it has its strange charm. It has something about it that is steeped in history as being an escape, really, for working-class people who wanted to get away and enjoy the sea breezes for a week in the summer. So it had that kind of a notion about it, but it wasn't a great place to grow up musically.
Yeah, but there was that great...
We didn't really get very much that was interesting coming to Blackpool. I mean, there was nothing in the way of jazz or blues. It was, I think the Rolling Stones played there once. I saw the Who when they were still called the High Numbers.
Wow.
Which most people won't remember. But they were same band just before their change of name.
And what did they sound like as the High Numbers?
Well, they were impressive. They were just an opening act on some sort of pop music variety show, and they stood out as being the band that shouldn't be there, because the other bands were all kind of tinsely, poppy kind of nice little love song kind of bands, and the Who, or the High Numbers as they were, came on belting out something that was it was a precursor of punk, the way they played it. I mean, it was high energy, highly aggressive, but really didn't fit at all with the rest of the show, so the audience were a bit horrified by them. As indeed when the Rolling Stones first appeared, although they were meek and mild, when you look at them today, they just look like a totally inoffensive bunch of sort of Beatles wannabes, but by the standards of them, they were hoodlums, they were tearaways, they were dangerous, and I think it was all just a product of the times. We grew up in a rather sedate suburban atmosphere where bands had to wear nice little neat suits and have well-cut hair, and generally be the sort of people you could take home to meet your mother.
But
which of course my wife finally did, and as a result of which I was made to cut my hair back in the late 70s.
Wow. Well, everybody get Ian Anderson's new album, Thick as a Brick 2, and he's on tour all over the world. He won't be here in New York until the fall, but he'll be here in October. Westbury, I think, is the first day.
Westbury's a startup. Yeah, that's it.
October 8th. Well, Ian Anderson, congratulations on the new album. Thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. We'll see you soon.
All right, take care. And, of course, you can go to iananderson.com. And there's a great Jethro Tull site, too, that you can go check out. It's Mark Simone here at 710 WOR.